What is Phantasmagoria? And what does it tell us about consumerism throughout history and in today's postmodern era? We are living in a postmodern era where many believe that success equals wealth and wealth equals happiness. However, wants and needs are often confused in a phantasmagorical environment. Jenna Goodrow reports that the results of the 2010 Gallup Wellbeing Survey indicate that the majority of the characteristics that aid or hinder our happiness all come down to personal wealth. So, it may be contradictory for me to make the claim that our modern consumer society is not actually delivering the happiness, wealth, and freedoms being promised, and that wants and needs are often confused in a phantasmagorical environment. Dino Faluga quotes Karl Marx as stating that life involves, before anything else, eating and drinking, a habitation, clothing, and many other things. The first historical act is thus the production of the means to satisfy these needs, the production of material life itself. However, as Dino Faluga goes on to explain, Karl Marx felt that ideology influences the material outputs of human production and that the ruling ideas in a society are usually determined by the ruling social class. In the 19th century, that ruling class was the bourgeois society, whose ideologies directly affected the conditions of politics, economics, religion, and more, including the production of things. As Alan Ryan explains, the bourgeoisie played a major role in industrializing and modernizing society, but they did so by exploiting the lower class, whose wants and needs were vastly different to those in the middle class. The bourgeoisie consumed material goods and services and strived for respectability within their new urban environment. In contrast, the workers living and working in the same walled towns who worked in the factories producing the material goods for the middle class thought only about where their next meal was coming from and how they would clothe their children. As a student of marketing communications in the 21st century, I study the messages and related media used to communicate a brand to consumers in the marketplace. It is my job to take creative ideas and transform them into attention-grabbing advertisements and disseminate them through the various forms of media available to marketing agencies today. My goal is to convince the consumer they need to buy this brand or buy that product, and if they do, they will be happy and their life will be good. My work appears to advocate the notion that success equals wealth and wealth equals happiness. For in order to consume or to buy a product that I'm promoting, they first need to have the freedom to choose and the ability to make the purchase, much like the bourgeoisie had the means to do so in the 19th century. Recently, a good friend of mine told me that she had been hearing a lot about a new exercise program. She had read the brochures, she had seen the commercials, and she had seen the people wearing their branded clothing label at the shopping mall. The advertising message was consistent. You will get incredible results that will transform your body using simple steps and brand new routines. Pause this presentation for a moment and go to the link that I've supplied and watch the television commercial that she was watching when she was sitting at home alone one Friday night, feeling unhealthy, overweight, and unhappy. So after watching the video, you can see that it is believable. This new fitness program promised that it would quickly transform her body by toning and sculpting it. She needed to lose weight for the health benefits, and who wouldn't want to look like those beautiful women in the advertisement? The advertising promised it would be satisfying, fulfilling, and rewarding. Now my friend is a successful career woman, and she has the money and the freedom to spend it how she wants. However, being busy with work, she has gained a few kilograms, and she's been getting sick a lot. She knew she needed to lose weight, so she purchased some of the brand labelled clothing so that she would look the part, and she couldn't wait to attend her first class. She was excited about achieving her new body whilst dancing to the infectious dance rhythms and wearing those trendy gym clothes like everyone else. So here I illustrate an example of a modern day consumer who has a successful career, she has money to spend, and the freedom to spend it how she wants to. However, what I would like to know is whether you, the viewer, believe that my friend's consumption has granted her with the happiness and good life that she was expecting. What do you think her experience was? Pause this presentation again and go to the comments section of this YouTube video and tell me your thoughts. So, my good friend went to the fitness class. She was full of enthusiasm, dressed in her designer fitness clothes, and with the belief she would lose weight quickly and easily. Unfortunately, the reality of her experience was totally different. Simply, what she thought she would look and feel like in the fitness class did not match up to her reality, and she left the class feeling embarrassed and with great disappointment. She never returned. Now, as a student of marketing communications, I am fascinated to learn from this experience and this dialectical relationship between expectation and reality. My friend's experience seems to confirm my findings in the literature that modern consumer society is not actually delivering the happiness, wealth, and freedoms being promised. This therefore leads me into a discussion about what writer and philosopher Walter Benjamin described during a period in history known as modernity. That period of time when the bourgeois society was caught up in the utopian ideal of hope, the dreamlike fantasy that is the power of the Phantasmagoria. Tom Gunning describes Phantasmagoria as the theatrical output of a modernist artist by the name of Etienne Gaspard Robinson. The Phantasmagoria became popular during the historical period that American philosopher Marshall Berman describes as the modernization of the Western world. It started during the 19th century and ended in the middle of the 20th century. Modernism occurred due to historical processes like the industrialization of production and new discoveries in science and technology. It was towards the end of the Enlightenment and the French Revolution era. These historical processes influenced the growth of new urban environments, and they were filled with promises, growth and transformation, as well as threats and conflict across the boundaries of geography, ethnicity, religion, class, nationality, and ideology. Modernity, as Peter Gray explains, was a body of experiences, and it was a new state of mind that was being adopted throughout the Western world. It was a time in history when prominent and innovative individuals like the bourgeoisie, with enough wealth and freedom to influence mass social movements, were developing fresh ways of thinking, feeling, and expressing their opinions about the world and their role within it. There were also the avant-garde artists of the period. They were individuals who were known for pushing through the boundaries of society, culture, politics, and economics. They were always questioning the status quo, and their response to modernism often produced innovative ideas, alternative works of art, and they conducted contemporary social experiments. One of these many avant-garde responses to modernism was the Phantasmagoria theatre, a revolutionary spectacle in its own right, and its concept was used by influential thinkers like Karl Marx and Walter Benjamin to describe some of the conditions of modernity, and they linked it to consumerism and capitalism. Now, discoveries in science and technology at the end of the 17th century allowed for the invention of the magic lantern and for the projection of images. Tom Gunning explains this technology was the precursor to the slide projector of more recent times. It was an invention that consisted of a lamp which allowed images painted on glass to be projected onto objects in dimly lit rooms. Derek Mead explains that Phantasmagoria was a spectacular theatre experience. These shows were often held inside abandoned crypts, the stone chambers that reside underneath the floors of old churches. These crypts contained religious artifacts like altars, coffins, or funeral receptacles, and in combination with the dark lighting, sound effects and optical illusions that were created by the magic lanterns, spectators were often scared to death, and on occasion they literally died from shock or suicide. Derek Mead quoted Etienne Gaspard Robinson as saying that he was only satisfied if the spectators were shivering and shuddering and raising their hands to cover their eyes out of fear of ghosts or devils dashing towards them. Mervyn Hurd explains that the Phantasmagoria shows of the early 1800s were our ancestors' equivalent to the modern horror film. Kenneth Panafilo points out that the interesting aspect of the Phantasmagoria theatre experience was not actually the horror element or the technological experimentation, but the total experience of the spectacle, the phantasmagorical environment. I've included a link to a video by Mervyn Hurd, where he explains comprehensively the techniques that Robinson used in his response to modernism. For example, he would meet his spectators in the comfort of their own urban environments, and then he would lead them into a world full of sensory overload, and he would promise them the unthinkable, like bringing the dead back to life. Robinson found the bourgeoisie easy to fool, and was able to put fanciful ideas into their heads before they even consumed his shows. His Phantasmagoria shows continually ensnared and bewildered his audiences and showed them the darker side of life at a time when their middle-class world was filled with hope and enlightenment. Take a moment to watch the video. Now, after watching the video, you have a better understanding of the Phantasmagoria and its effect on its spectators, and this can help us to understand why Walter Benjamin may have used the term Phantasmagoria in a metaphorical way to explain the complex ways in which he believed people became tangled up within the materialistic and ascetic paraphernalia and propaganda of a capitalist world. Margaret Cohen quotes Benjamin as proposing that the new economic and technical creations of the early 19th century created a universe where society was ruled by the phantasmagorical powers of the commodity. He used the Phantasmagoria theatre as a metaphor to describe the spectacle of the bourgeoisie who were living in a period of rapid urbanisation and industrialisation of product, and when cultural perspectives and values, along with wealth and prosperity, afforded society the freedoms and choice to consume whatever goods they desired, despite their needs. To borrow from a description by Susan Buck Morris and Walter Benjamin's writings in the Arcade Project, the early arcades of Paris were marvellous buildings constructed of the new industrial materials of the day, like iron and glass. But at the same time, they borrowed their respectable, grandiose design from ancient Hellenic-style architecture. These colossal public spaces contained shops that lined the streets and displayed commodities like icons. You can imagine the sounds of pleasure, the sight of beautiful artworks, rows of colourful fabrics, and the smells of food and perfumes. They were places in which people entered in order to be distracted, and they presented with promises of happiness in a physical form. What I would like to know is whether you, the viewer, believe that today's shopping centres are similar to the arcades of Paris in the 19th century. Are they full of sensory overload that lure people and put fanciful ideas into the consumer's mind? Once again, pause this presentation for a moment and go to the comments section of this YouTube video and tell me your thoughts. Sue MacLeod explains, through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that humans are naturally motivated to achieve certain needs, and once fulfilled, a person seeks to fulfill the next need. In a modern society, our basic physiological needs such as food, air and water, and our safety needs such as security of employment and property are usually met. And as Peter Gay reminds us, modernism is unthinkable without the substantial and influential number of patrons and clients affluent enough, free enough, and disposed enough to support it. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, in their avant-garde response to consumerism, in their song called Wings, attempt to point out the confusion that is created between needs and wants in the postmodern era, and that we seek that third level of need, the need to belong. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis are claiming through their music that our wants and needs are often confused through consumerism. That as a society, we are infatuated and attached to logos, labels, brands, and the fleeting happiness that is intrinsically linked to the almighty power of the purchase. That we begin to think that by buying a product that makes great promises, we will find happiness and that our needs will be satisfied. Now, just like my friend who I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the one who purchased brand name clothes to help her fit in at her fitness class, or the boy in the Wings video purchased a brand name pair of shoes that promised to make him jump high just like his basketball hero, and that this would make him cool around his friends. Those brand name shoes gave him the belief that he could achieve great things. Unfortunately, the happiness the boy was expecting was short-lived, for he found out that a friend was murdered for his brand name shoes. The perpetrators wanted a commodity that promised them the same happiness. The difference was they could not afford to buy them. Macklemore and Ryan rap out the line, "We are what we wear what we are." The boy and the perpetrators were tricked. They unknowingly believed the marketing company and they were lured by the Phantasmagoria. In Australia, we have an advertising code of ethics that is designed to self-regulate advertising to ensure that all forms of marketing communications are legal, decent, honest, and truthful as an obligation to the consumer and society. Section 1.2 in particular states that advertising or marketing communications shall not be misleading or deceptive or be likely to mislead or deceive. I'd like to wind up this presentation by claiming again that our modern consumer society is not actually delivering the happiness, wealth, and freedoms being promised, and that wants and needs are often confused in a phantasmagorical environment. I proposed earlier that we are living in a postmodern era where many believe that success equals wealth and wealth equals happiness. My exploration of modernism and the bourgeoisie during the mid-19th to mid-20th century illustrates that this is not a new phenomenon, and that the need to belong and consume has always been a part of human nature. My discoveries through research of the social and cultural conditions of modernity and their effect on the arts do step me back towards my career in marketing communications, and they make me question my own personal ethics and the consequences of my marketing communication outputs. Am I, just like the showman of the Phantasmagoria, am I responding to the effects of modernism and to the concept of the hierarchy of needs and using them to put fanciful ideas into the heads of consumers? My last question then is, should I be concerned that the consumers that I target through marketing communications are being confused about their wants and needs in the phantasmagorical environment in which we all exist? I have placed all references and links to the literature mentioned in this presentation in the accompanying handout titled "What is Phantasmagoria?" I have also included links to the videos in the comments section of this YouTube video.